All right, we're going to be starting on page 68 tonight, A Mirroring Universe. This is, again, just this, Richard Rohr. We're halfway through the book, and it only took us a year. We're just motoring along, motoring along. Um, Real quickly, before we dive in, is there anything that you've been thinking about this week? Any stuff from last week that you want to bring up? Okay. Beth and Brady, are you done with dinner yet? So we can see your smiling faces?
In a little bit, we're here. Hey,
Yeah.
I have one thing real quickly. I mean, this is just like just a little footnote. Um, and this is why Beth and I love this group and Dave and Marion. It's why we love you. I was listening to a neuropsychologist the other day on the radio, and he was talking about this phenomenon where there's so much information, disinformation, ugly information that for people who are like undecided politically, they don't know what to do. They get confused, and the confusion makes them uncomfortable. There's a cognitive dissonance. And to relieve themselves from the discomfort, they just make a decision, take one side or the other, and go from there. And this just occurred to me. I'm listening to him and I'm thinking, words should be an act of clarity. And that's what we appreciate about you, Dave. And that's what we appreciate about this group.
Brady, that's lovely. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I mean, thank you.
And that's the way I feel about it too. I mean, I know any of you who are just watching the recording, you missed our opening prayer, but that was it. I mean, just the gratitude to be able to show up here each week with these faces and just talk and feel safe. I mean, it's you don't know what you got till it's gone, right? Tony Mitchell. It's like if we didn't have this, we would so miss it. And yet sometimes we end up taking things for granted. But that's what presence will do for you. It will allow you not to take things for granted because you're really present to it. You're really aware of everything you've got before it's gone. That's really, maybe that's a good way of looking at contemplation, you know?
Funny remembering how we were so uncomfortable with the idea of having to set up Zoom and use Zoom and all the technology when the COVID thing came along. And now we're here and we're ever so grateful to have this available to us to enjoy the moments. It's funny how it changed and evolved over the last couple of years.
Something we need to put this on our fridge, and maybe this is a good ongoing definition. Contemplation is the art of knowing what you've got before it's gone. How about that? Certainly. I like that. All right. All right, let's get into it. We've burned some time here. Page 68, A Mirroring Universe. All right, Saint Francis of Assisi, 1184 to 1226, knew that if we can accept that the finite manifests the infinite, there's a phrase for you. If we can accept that the finite manifests the infinite and that the physical is the doorway to the spiritual, then all we need is right here and right now. This is the way to that. Heaven includes earth. Earth reveals heaven. Time opens up to the timeless. Space opens up to spacelessness. If we can only recognize them as the clear doorways that they are, it is then an entirely sacramental universe. In the Big Bang of creation, maybe 14 billion years ago, God first revealed the goodness of God in visible form. Then the incarnation of Jesus 2,000 years ago made the same message clear, believable, and visible in one personal manifestation. Thus, there are not sacred and profane things, places, and moments. There are only sacred things and desecrated things, places, and moments. And we alone can desecrate them by our blindness and lack of reverence. It is one sacred universe, and we are all a part of it. For Christians, Jesus is the marvelous shortcut to that recognition. The Christ mystery will always be very concrete, very seductive, and continually begging for recognition. We see that everything is a revelation of the divine, from rocks to rocket ships. The incarnation is always and forever taking place, and God is perfectly hidden and perfectly revealed in every moment, person, and place. A lot of strong statements in this section. Any initial thoughts, takeaways? Something jump out?
The incarnation is always and forever taking place.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one, huh?
Mhm.
We'll talk about that in a sec.
Mm.
Anything else? All right. Well, let's go back to the top and let's start picking it apart. As we do, St. Francis of Assisi knew that if we can accept that the finite manifests the infinite and the physical is the doorway to the spiritual, then all we need is right here and right now. What does he mean? The finite manifests the infinite. That would be the first phrase there that jumps out. Any
Is,
thoughts?
is finite just talking about our time boundedness?
Yes, anything that's got an end date. Anything
Okay.
with an expiration date is the finite.
Okay.
So everything that is physical in this universe has an expiration date
Mm.
of some sort or another, right? So yes, he's saying that the finite manifests, realizes, brings to reality the infinite.
Okay.
Okay. Do you remember a while back? In fact, we should probably go back. Let's go back to page 36. I'll read that section real quickly. I think he's throwing us back to this section where he was talking about the holon, Holon. And a holon is anything that is whole in and of itself, but is also a part of the larger self or replicates something larger, like a seed. A seed would be whole and in itself, but it also is a part of the tree and it replicates the tree. You could probably think of the cells in your body in the same way. You know, they are whole and complete in and of themselves, but they also are part of the larger self, and they carry the DNA that can replicate the whole. Even a human being, you're whole in yourself, but you're also part of society. You're part of family. You're part of larger bits. And same thing with the flock and the individuals within the flock. When we go back to page 36, he says that St. Augustine ended one of his great sermons by saying, in the end, there will only be Christ loving himself. Paul preceded St. Augustine when he said that in the end, God will be all in all. They saw creation as coming full circle. Both Augustine and Paul are pointing out that the Eternal One has come forth and has taken on form and manifestation in the whole of creation. Humans, animals, plants, elements, the galaxies, and all the endless forms and faces that have come forth from God. Do you see how he's basically saying that the finite is manifesting or revealing the infinite? Everything you have ever seen with your eyes is the infinite self-emptying of God. And what goes around comes back around. So God has emptied himself, herself, into space-time, creating the universe, if you will. Your job as a conscious human is to awaken early to this inherent beauty and goodness. Why wait until heaven when you can enjoy the divine flow in everything you see now? Being fully present to the soul of all things will allow you to say, this is good, this is enough. In fact, this is all I need. You are now situated in the one loving gaze that unites all things in universal attraction and appreciation. This is enlightenment, and you do not have to sit on a cushion for 40 years to enjoy it. As Lady Julian of Norwich, one of my favorite mystics, said when she looked lovingly at one little hazelnut in the palm of her hand. Okay, so that's a holon, right? The hazelnut. This is everything that is. Everything that is contained in this hazelnut. Everything that God is, everything that God manifests in our life is in this one little hazelnut. And our contemporary Ken Wilber puts it this way: everything is a holon, a part that replicates the whole. So I'm pretty sure this is what he's hearkening back to, this idea, when he's over here saying the finite manifests the infinite. Here's Julian of Norwich holding that hazelnut in her hand. And you can just imagine, something that she sees every day. It's just a part of her life, the hazelnut. And she's looking at it and she's just going into this reverie, going into this, this zone where she realizes the entirety of creation is present right there in her palm, the palm of her hand, in that hazelnut. Everything that is the tree is present in her hand in that hazelnut, but everything that is God is also present because it's a manifestation of the infinite that preceded. Interesting, right? And then he goes on that the physical is the doorway to the spiritual. So we have the seed of the infinite in every finite moment. And now the physical is the doorway to the spiritual. We've talked about this a lot in that Greek philosophy is very dualistic. Matter is evil and spirit is good. And the Gnostics took that to an art form where they actually believe that the creator of this universe, the creator of this world, Yahweh God, was an evil demiurge, because that God created matter where it didn't exist, and matter was evil and to be avoided. The soul would escape the material body at death and then ascend where it was supposed to ascend. And everything about Gnostic spirituality, whether it was Christian or not, was about the ascension of the soul to escape the physical, to escape matter, and then ascend back to the essential pre-existing spiritual condition. And so you have that idea, but the Jews are exactly the opposite. The Hebrews believe that you're more spiritual when you are immersed in physicality, immersed in the physical life. I mean, you just read the Old Testament. It is earthy, man, right? It is earthy. It is just, I mean, they leave no stone unturned. Soap operas have nothing on the Old Testament. You just read Genesis, read it all. It's they pull no punches. It's l'chaim. You immerse in life. That's the way you become more spiritual. And in Greece, in the Greek theology, philosophy, you exit life, physical life, in order to become more spiritual. And of course, the church inherited that in spades, to the point that the body was this horrible thing that you had to mortify in order to become more like Christ and become more spiritual. So we've got this whole thing back to front here. So the finite manifests in the infinite. The seed of the infinite, the seed of God's face, is present in all these finite moments and events and individual form and function. And the physical, immersing ourselves in the physical, is the doorway to the spiritual. We are going to experience, while we're breathing here, our spirituality always through our physicality. It's the only way that it works. So if that is true, if those two things are true, he's saying, then all we need is right here and right now. We're not waiting for anything. And that's Jesus. The waiting is over, right? Mark 1:15, the waiting is over. The kingdom is here. The kingdom is now. There's no more waiting for anything. If you're waiting for something, you're not in kingdom. If you're waiting for something, then you're not really present here and now. So everything we need is here now. This is the way to that. This moment is the holon for all of eternity, if you want to look at it that way. It contains all of eternity. And this is something that we've been talking about a lot as well. In fact, maybe I'll just go ahead and read this right now, because I seem to have led up to it pretty well. And I think we read this before, and I know I read it on a Sunday, but once again, this idea that this moment is everything, the entirety of eternity is contained in this moment. Rupert Spira writes, on the line of time, there is an experience that we refer to as now. It is the moment now. From the point of view of time, the now is a moment, but in our experience, the now is not a moment. How many nows have passed since we've been talking? How many nows have passed in your life? It is always now. We never leave the now. We've never left the now and visited the past or the future. No one's ever experienced the past or the future. We can think about the past or the future, but we only do so now. In our actual experience, the now is not a moment that is sandwiched between the two vast spaces of the past and the future. The now is the ever present. Time is not everlasting. The now is the ever present. The now is written with a capital N. The now is eternity. The now is the place where time and eternity intersect. The now is a portal through which we pass out of time and into eternity. And the place that you call over there, have you ever been there? You can think of there, but if you were to stand up and go over there, would you leave the here? Has anybody ever left the experience we call here and visited the place we call there? Isn't the experience of here always the same experience? Here is not a place in space, just as now is not a moment in time. Here is written with a capital H. Here is the infinite, just as now is the eternal. All space takes place here. Here is the placeless place, just as now is the intersection of time and eternity. Wherever we are located, wherever we call here, is the intersection of space and the infinite. Now is a portal through which we pass out of time and into eternity. Here is a portal through which we pass out of space and into the infinite. Now, out of time into eternity. Here, out of space into the infinite. I just think he really captured it in this. And I've edited it, so just for time and content. But
Who is this guy, Dave? Who is this?
Rupert Spira. So
Who is he?
Yeah, who is he?
what's that?
Who is he? Is he kind of
He's a
an
writer.
author of
I'm forgetting now. It's been a while.
Philosopher.
Rupert is an English philosopher, author, and potter based in
Potter.
Oxford, UK.
Well, he has to be grounded somehow.
Yeah. Just think of Demi Moore and what's his face. He's a potter based in Oxford,
Yeah.
UK. He's a proponent of non-dualism and what he terms the direct path. So he's a philosopher and a writer. I actually pulled this off a YouTube podcast, but I just he did a great job. I'm sorry. I don't think so.
that if you don't mind sending it.
Yeah. I'd like
Scott, are
to
you
too.
talking to us or somebody else?
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
talking to you, Dave.
Okay. What are you saying?
talking
A copy of the Here and Now that you just
that you
was
just
reading
read.
from.
Yeah.
Could you send it to us?
Oh, you what? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, can you do that here and now?
No, but I will do it there
It's-
then.
or after? Do it
I will
then.
do it. I will do it there and then.
But don't wait till eternity.
Okay. But I just thought, this is something that we really got to get our arms around as much as it's possible to get your arms around, because it's actually impossible to get your arms fully around it, in a cognitive way, because it's just a paradox that it's like the Trinity. You're never going to resolve it. But if we can start to remember that as we are experiencing our moments and trying to come back to our moments and practicing presence and mindfulness and all the things that we do in contemplation, if we can remember, we are trying to simply maintain our grasp, our connection, our grounding in the only moment that exists. This is it. This moment we're having right now, this is it. This is all there is. And this is all that there will ever be. There is only really one moment with changing circumstances. And when we die and we pass into whatever happens next, it's still going to be the same moment. There is no other moment. There is only this moment. Eternity is not a whole lot of time stretching out on a line. Eternity is just one moment eternally. It's the same moment, but we don't have to wait for eternity because eternity is now. We don't have to wait for kingdom because kingdom is now. Kingdom is the quality of life that we live when we're grounded in now and here. This is it. This is all there is. And this is the hardest thing for us to get because we experience time on a line. We experience space spatially. We're here and we're not there, but there is no there. One of the things that was fascinating to me was when Stephen Hawking said that the universe is finite. Okay, it doesn't go on forever, but also that it has no edge. It's expanding, but it's finite, but it has no edge. So like we're inside a huge black hole, whatever direction we pick, if we go far enough, we end up back where we started. We will never get to the edge of the universe where it thins out and we can look back at the ball, because what's actually happening is that space is being created as the universe expands. It's not expanding into space. Space doesn't exist until three-dimensional universe creates it as it expands. And so there is no there out there. There's only here. And every point in the universe looks exactly the same as every other one as you look at the star field, equal density and distribution. And every point in the universe is exactly the center of the universe because no other point makes any sense. And if you translate that to our position with God, it's a beautiful connection. Just as we were talking about quantum mechanics last night, and how the uncertainty principle and quantum entanglement can also give us these beautiful analogies or metaphors for the way that we can connect with God, so can this idea of time and space. And so to have it just in our minds and to keep coming back to it as we are practicing whatever we practice in our contemplative lives, I think can help us to at least have more and more gratitude and awareness of this moment, right? What did we say? Contemplation is the art of knowing what you have before it's gone, And so to have this knowledge of what this moment really is makes it impossible to ignore. And yet we ignore our moments constantly throughout our days. We're not present to them because we think we've got all these moments. And so what's one little moment if I don't pay attention, right? Doesn't mean anything. In fact, it's a boring moment. There's nothing to it. I can leap over this moment like Kansas and get to the good stuff in New York. We treat our lives like flyover country constantly. Can't do that. If Kansas is all there is, you're going to appreciate Kansas a heck of a lot more, right? All right, there's my rant for the evening.
That's a good rant, though.
That was a-
Okay.
No, and I'll tell you why, because I think that lines up with, and I'm going to go back to the chapter when Richard Rohr was talking about the spinning top, right? And he talks about that the dervish, this person that's dancing, he says, again, in the sacred dance, there was a spinning around a calm and fixed center. In fact, a dervish could not fake a calm center and survive the prayer. One foot had to be firmly, calmly grounded in a stable love, or they could not do the dance. One hand raised, one hand grounded. And I think what I'm hearing is, or how I'm interpreting what you're saying is that center is that moment, because that is all you got. And if you're not focused on that center or in that moment, because I know when I was like, I'm doing this visual thing, I'm learning to do this dance. I got a big wide walking path, but I actually close my eyes and all distractions disappear, and I'm just focusing on how do I stay centered. But what I didn't catch that was really beautiful was, where is that? Oh, it's probably going to come back to me. Oh, right here. Where he talks about where he thought about the three different kinds of love, but then he says that he found that that center was the love within me. And that is like blows my mind. Because he changed from the Trinity to the one. And when I imagine like the swirling, it's like, oh, it's like, there's just like a peace in that place. I don't know that you can sustain it because you do have to live life. You got to watch Dodgers and New York Giants game. You got to vote. But it does, I think, speak to the people that Freddie was talking about that feel so much pressure. They just vote, right? I got to get this out of me. But if you're centered, you realize I don't need to vote. I just need to stay centered. I can vote, but there's no pressure to do anything next. And that's crazy because it's easier for me to say what I just said because it's like as I'm saying this now, I'm also like aware of the second before. I'm not aware of the second that's coming, but I am aware of the experience before is still there. So I don't know how that ties in. The second before.
You know, it's interesting, Tony, and you know, I've thought about this a lot, and of course, lots of science fiction writers thought about this a lot too. Is that because of our experience of the past, that the time seems to be linear. Now, you can look at your past, and it's almost like you know, just stones in a lawn, marking the path that you actually chose. And so you imagine that the future looks the same way, that that path continues on into the future, and you just have to take it. But the truth of the matter is that the future is not a path. The future, at best, is a cloud of possible moments. And it's all based on
Yeah.
your choices. You have a cloud of possibilities, but you choose, you step down on the next flagstone, right? And now the cloud changes. Now you've got a different cloud of possible moments and another cloud and another cloud. And that's the way the future is created by turning it into the past. And yet the past doesn't exist. It's just what we remember. You know, in fact, if someone said, if we have no memory, there would be no time. Well, there would still be time, but we would have no sense of the passage of time if we had no memory, right? How could you
Yeah.
remember anything? I mean, how could you ever have a sense of passage of time if you had no memory? And so it's so true that our concept of time is the illusion, is the creation. The Aborigines had it right. They said the linear experience of time is the illusion. What they call dream time, every when, is the reality. And as we say, we see it as the opposite. The linear concept of time is the truth, and then the every when is the mystical illusion or the LSD trip, right? But it's just the opposite, truth be told.
This this reminds me, I think I mentioned that discussion I had with a mathematician once. And the guy was really interesting, and he had a good way of describing things. But he had several arguments. One argument was there's no such thing as a moment, because in the passage of time, however you imagine it, if you were to put a line and say it's the moment, you'd never experience it. You have to have an experience that goes over a period of what you call time to be able to capture some kind of experience that you call a moment. But it wasn't a moment, it was an experience. But the other thing that I loved about the guy, he said there's no such thing as the norm. He says, you know, look at the bell curve, and you got this line down the middle, the average, the norm. He says no such thing as a norm, because norm is an imaginary line, doesn't exist, but an imaginary line through which we pass. We're never there. We move towards it, and then we're on the other side of it. But we're never really there because we're in motion.
That's interesting.
And that what we do is we capture and find some way to define those moments as discrete objects or discrete things. And so we have these devices, a photograph, a statistical measure, to somehow capture it and define it. But it doesn't define the actual nature of whatever we're experiencing or whatever we're trying to measure. And it's very consistent with what we're saying here, which I love. I'm very comfortable with that. It's just kind of like, my image is of two wheels rolling in opposite directions, touching each other. And whatever propels them creates this situation where there's this place where they're always touching, but they never touch because it never exists. There's this space that comes down to the point where it's going to meet the other wheel, and then it's on the other side, and then it's around again until it comes towards it again. It never really touches it. It just moves by it.
Mm.
Um, and I
That's beautiful. That's because like
I thought you'd like.
I do like it because it's like I can as I'm talking now and I don't look at the moments, I'm experiencing with you and with all of us right now, I'm experiencing the divine right now.
Hmm.
And not a moment of the divine, I'm experiencing the divine. And that is a profound way because I don't know the next second. None of us do, right? But if I try to like control it, then of course the anxiety is going to come with it. But if I sort of just hang in there in it, then I stay in the divine because we're speaking of the divine.
So you're the infinite right now that expresses the. No, you're the finite right now that expresses the infinite.
There it is.
That's
Yes.
Now, we could also say that Rosemary's been putting a few too many mushrooms in his Wheaties, but
Well, my head hurts now listening to
I know,
all
We
but
this.
can
the
do
beautiful
that.
thing is what we were talking about. Tony is right in the middle of this new experience, and everything is just blowing his mind. His mind is kind of permanently blown right now. And it's beautiful the way you're experiencing your enthusiasm for it all, Tony.
Mr.
And that's,
Psilocybin.
Yeah.
but here's the question that you should, after we've talked like this for what, 15, 20 minutes, here's the question you should all be asking yourselves. So what? Right? We can have these kind of questions. And so what? I mean, when we actually go out tomorrow and we are going to live our lives and do errands or go to work or whatever we do, we're going to experience time as linear. We're going to experience it as a line. We're going to experience discrete moments. We're going to have things that we need to get done that we have planned. We're going to have a calendar that's going to lock us to times that are going to move in the future. And we're going to experience things the way we always do. So to have a conversation like this is not practical, it's not rational, it's not logical, but it is so important to keep in mind that the actual fabric of reality revolves around these mushroom kind of moments, right? They are going to completely defy what we normally experience. It's good to remind yourself of that, to keep that in the back of your mind, to start balancing it out so that during your day, as you're going through all the things that you need to do, experiencing the pressure that you experience, the pressure to choose one or the other and do all the things that Brady and Tony have been talking about. But in the back of your mind, you also realize this is the only moment that exists. If I don't treat it in a sacred way, it becomes desecrated.
Mm.
It is up to us to bring the sacred to the moment. It already is there, but we won't participate in it until we are aware of its sacred nature, so that even the mundane things like Brother Lawrence experienced become sacred because they're done with the awareness of God's presence and that this is the only moment that exists. And that sense of all at once time, every when, the dream time, we can actually start to overlay that on top of the experiences that we're having in regular linear time. And it transforms the way that we go through our day. And then when we go to our actual contemplative practices, the carved out times, then we can actually be more clear about what it is we're entering. We're really letting go of everything that dilutes the fact that we are in the only moment that exists and in the center of God's universe, always in the very center of it. So these concepts sound like, they're just mind candy, but they're really not. They really do express something that is, in my estimation, real. But we're still going to have to go through our lives the way we do, experiencing it through the egoic reality. But balanced, it can make a huge difference. So that's the so what.
Yeah. So I can move, I can be in the awareness of the centering and then I can move in the spirit of the divine. So what I'm trying to say
Okay.
there is, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm aware of what's happening within me, but it's still, I have a crying baby over here, right? But I'm moving into that, with love and appreciation or whatever, and not from the spirit of hatred or angry or frustration. And I know I don't think I'll ever reach perfection in this, but it's when I went through a lot of therapy, I remember after a while, one day when it was like my therapist told me, she says, with some people that go to see her, she just has to move the furniture. But she says with me, we had to rebuild the whole house. And I thought that was profound because as I moved forward out of that, there was times that I would say, what would Dr. Marr do in this case? She'd begin to fill a role of a parent or somebody that I could go to. And I'm liking that to this, what would God do in this? What would Jesus do in this? What would the divine do in this case? And then I can move in that spirit and I can move in the divine because it'd be
That's
God working through me.
That's perfect, Tony, especially if you take the what would Jesus do away from just lawful or unlawful behavior, which is mostly where that saying is applied, and bring it into the how of being able to really apprehend these moments as the all, right? And change our perception around to be able to see some of the crazy things that we're talking about here, and it really doesn't matter how we try to express it, and whether our expression makes sense to anybody else. It only has to make sense to us enough to be able to take us into that moment, to appreciate that moment, and to be present to it. And guaranteed, your expression of it now is not going to be your same expression of it in 2 or 3 or 5 years. As you continue on this path, your expression of it will change. Your experience won't, but the expression changes, as does everyone. I mean, take a look at Thomas Merton's early writings compared to his later ones. A vast difference, in where he went in 15, 20 years. And same thing is true of all of us that stay on this path.
I have something to offer here.
Yeah.
I've got a client, one of the cops I see was a Marine, and he did 3 tours, and one of the tours he was at the 2006 war at Ramadi. And he's talking about this point where he was a sergeant in his small group. It's like 5 of them are in a Humvee and they go over an IED. And a lot of guys survived those. The Humvee did not turn over. All the guys were able to get out of it and survive. And they immediately got into, there was an ambush, and so there was going to be a firefight. And so he said he went through this experience where it was like, in millionths of a second, these things went through his head. And it started with, what should I do? What will I do? What must I do? What would they have me do? All these questions about what external things would dictate his behavior just kept coming through his mind and getting discharged. And all of a sudden it just landed on, what is there to do? And that's when he acted. Submitted to it, complied with it. And I just thought it was the guy's a spiritual guy. He's Christian, wonderful, wonderful guy. But I just thought it was wonderful for him to have that awareness of discharging the obligatory, the dictatorial, the prescriptive way of whatever, and just realizing what the situation required of him.
And that's the exact same process that we go through when we try to apply, what we traditionally look at as the law, right? It's not a one size fits all. It's not prescriptive, as you said. It's not obligatory. If we're really going to live as Jesus lives, we just bring our whole self into the situation. we really see what is going on and see who is sharing the moment with us. And then we choose what love would require. What is
Right.
there to do that is loving in this situation? And it may be to break the code of the law in order to
Right.
be the most loving expression in that moment. But if we're not present to it, I mean, I guarantee under a circumstance like Brady is telling us, that guy was present because it was life and death, right?
Very.
Very present. And if we are that present, we can see things as they really are. You know, we don't have the luxury of hiding behind all of this stuff that we've constructed over the years and decades. It all goes away, and now we're just present. But can we do that intentionally now when the moment isn't intense? But we can just be there and really see what's going on and make our choices based on that, not by some pre-contained, pre-established judgment,
Yeah.
but by what's right in front of us. All ethics are situational. I know that got a bad rap there, but no, they have to be. They're situational. They're going to change. So being in the moment is everything. Then what contemplation is about is practicing the art of being in the moment, being present to the moment, stepping outside all the structures that are limiting us from being fully present and able to be free enough to choose what is really required at the moment. See,
Well,
this
yeah,
is why we're
what
only
I-
halfway through this book.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And but what I'm hearing though is, you know, many times I've heard Richard Rohr speak, and every time I am like amazed of how he reacts. Somebody will ask him a question, and it just comes. It just sounds like, wow, how does he like? Where does he pull this from? And I think that's the experience that Brady's talking about. It is that experience will speak to the reality of the future. And I'm not sure those are the right words to say, but it's that experience, not the moment, those past experiences become the reality for me in that moment that's going to show up that I don't understand it or where it's coming from. And that's powerful when I think about it that way. Because it brings me back away from, you know, eating the mushrooms to a reality moment. And I think that's what I'm realizing, that when I hear Richard Rohr speak, or when I hear even when you're speaking here, and when I'm like a lot of people are, or even with Brady, that past experience becomes the reality of how of the divine within me.
Mhm.
And it keeps me grounded in reality. Whatever this reality is, my next moment is flows with that. And I'm probably not saying that anywhere making sense, but
Doesn't have to make sense to us.
this is good.
It has to make sense to you. So
Yeah.
It
as
makes
long
sense
as
to me.
if it's helping
Yeah.
you to get the concept, then that's great. Roll with it until it's not helping you anymore. And then be willing to drop it, let it go, and form the new. I mean, that's the
Is,
process,
Perfect.
right?
is it,
Okay, let's
would it, can I just say one thing? I'm asking a question.
okay.
Would it be fair, to say, listening to Brady's story and Tony too, I guess a question about letting go of judgment, based on past beliefs or education or, the shoulds, the coulds, all of this kind of stuff, that would need to be put aside or surrendered if I'm going to be really taking in how the spirit is working in that particular situation and
Not
guiding me. Is that
necessarily. Yeah,
okay?
you don't
All
need to
right.
necessarily put it aside. You have to be willing to put it aside. And
Okay.
there's a difference there, because our training is not for nothing. I mean, this soldier that Brady is talking about, he was trained how to survive situations just like that. His training was there for him. It was burned down into muscle memory at that point in his career, I'm sure. And so all of that was there. And I'm sure he used that training in order to survive and be able to tell Brady the story. But in a given situation, we have to be willing to put it all aside and really be present to the situation. What applies here that I already know? What doesn't apply? What rules actually are going to work here, and what do I need to break in order to be able to really be present and come through this particular situation? In more normal, just relationships that in moments of relationship, it's the same thing. We need to actually be present to the person, see them as well as we can see them, ascertain their needs, what does the situation require? And of course, the law as we have been taught it, and our ethics and our morals are all going to be part of that process. But once you've gone through all of that, and as Brady related the soldier doing, you get down to, what is left? What is there to do? What can I actually control? What does love require? And then you make your choice based on that. So it's the willingness to let go, not that you necessarily would do so, if that
Gotcha.
helps.
Yeah, no, it does.
The problem
Can I-
the problem we get into is that we're clinging so tightly to the law, so tightly to our standards, that they become the one size fit all, and we never deviate from them. And then we just become intolerant. We're never really practicing love on the micro scale anymore. We're just following the obligatories, and that does not work. And that is exactly what Jesus is so stridently teaching against in Matthew 5 and 6. Yes, Ellen.
Okay, so while everybody's talking, I'm bursting at the seams because I'm writing notes. So I'll summarize only 3 things, okay? So when Brady said there's a bell curve and there's not really a norm, I went to a university where many of the professors use a bell curve. It's a moving target, right? All you need are 2 or 3 brilliant students, and what I would have been an A student with that class, I'm a C student. So it's a moving target. So yeah, no norms. The other one actually is when you say what love requires of me. There, my one daughter, this is boyfriend number 3. I dislike him so much because he'll come along. He's like a taker. He gets lunch. I pay for the lunch for the girls, and he's along each time. He uses my daughter to take him to work, and his work is like a mile away. I mean, get a bike, whatever, take the bus. And really, I disliked him so much. So one lady told me, because you love your daughter, you show respect to him. And I did, and that changed the whole thing. And of course, they broke up after a year. And I'm glad I did what I did, because my relationship with my daughter would have been worse had I shown disrespect to him. And yeah, he's a broken kid. He came from a broken family, and I think I told it to you, Dave, one time, because he came, we invited him to Thanksgiving. He had nowhere to go. We invited him for Christmas dinner. He had nowhere to go. Okay. And then the other one, which reminded me about immortality. So one of my favorite poet is Emily Dickinson. And this one is titled "My Life Closed Twice Before It's Closed." And she always talks about death, right? And I'm going to summarize. So phrase immortality. It yet remains to see if immortality unveil a third event to me, meaning she doesn't know. But I think it looks like 2 of her loved ones had passed away. And then this was the one that I really love, and it's like very, very profound. It says, parting is all we know of heaven and all we need of hell. So we have no idea what heaven is, but we get a little glimpse. But you have to die first before you will know if there's immortality or heaven. And so that's what I see also.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
These kinds of topics that we're talking about, when we really get into this really profound existential stuff, is going to be the launching pad for all sorts of excursions for you, mentally and spiritually and every other way. And that's really good and healthy. So, take the excursions, ask yourself the so what question, because at some point it's got to become practical again. I mean, we're not doing this just to try to decide how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. We're really trying to do something that is going to help us. If it doesn't have a one-to-one correspondence with the next choice you're going to make, as you get off this call, then maybe you put it on the shelf for a while until you can make that connection. It doesn't mean that one doesn't exist. It's just it's not available to you now. But all of this is going to be practical in the contemplative living out of our daily lives. And so we want that connection to be strong. We want to actually see how this is valuable to us and not just be completely abstract and theoretical. So let it kind of filter in, you know, but I'd say keep returning to it. You know, maybe, you know, Google some stuff and some YouTube videos and some of these aspects of it. Could be quantum mechanics, or it can be a lot of other things that kind of take you into these mind-bending realms, because they do have real metaphorical value to the experience of our spirituality in terms of our relationships with each other and with God, and just with everything in this one moment that we're talking about. So having this as a ballast or a balance is going to be real important if you're really going to try to live your life contemplatively and bring that into the picture. So I was going to say I would like to read a little bit more so I feel better about myself, but we're really at time. So we didn't even get through one paragraph tonight. Okay, we're going to get through one paragraph.
There's therapy for that, Dave. We
We're
have therapy for that.
failing
This is,
Good
miserably.
to give you, Dave.
Yeah, I need this to just, you know, kind of soothe the OCD part of my brain. At the bottom of page 68, time opens up to us opens us up to the timeless. Space opens us up to spacelessness, kind of what Rupert Spira was talking about, right? If we can only recognize them as the clear doorways that they are, it is then an entirely sacramental universe. In the Big Bang of creation, maybe 14 billion years ago, God first revealed the goodness of God in invisible form. So Genesis 1:9-31, that's the 6 days of creation, right? So God is speaking things into existence, and at the end of every day, he says it is good. All right, so that's the goodness of God being spoken into existence and revealing his goodness, his nature, if you will. Then the incarnation of Jesus 2,000 years ago made the same message clear, believable, and visible in one personal manifestation. And so here's God, infinite velocity and temperature, you know, standing outside of space and time, putting just a point of God's stuff down and letting it cool and expand. I mean, if you want to think of it that way, that's the Big Bang. That's the moment the whole universe is just one point of God's stuff that it was allowed to cool from infinite values down to something that we can actually measure. And Jesus is the emptying, you know, of God's stuff into a human being so we can see what God manifests and looks like in human form. Thus, there are not sacred and profane things, places, and moments. There are only sacred and desecrated things. And we talked about this. It's we who recognize the sacred nature of each moment or not. And if we don't, it's desecrated by our blindness and our lack of reverence. It is one sacred universe, and we're all a part of it. And so for Christians, Jesus is a marvelous shortcut to that recognition. The Christ mystery will always be very concrete, seductive, continually begging for recognition. We see that everything is a revelation of the divine. We're back to that holon, right? From rocks to rocket ships, everything is pointing back to the whole. The incarnation is always and forever taking place. God is always recreating, making all things new in the language of Revelation. And God is perfectly hidden and perfectly revealed in every moment, person, and place. We talk so much at the head of this conversation. I think all of that kind of lays into our conversation. I don't know if any more of it needs to be developed. If it does, make a note of it, and we'll hit it at the head of next week's conversation, because we're out of time here. But this was a great conversation. I hope you all got a lot of stuff out of it.
Yeah.
And even though
And,
it's
you know,
kind of like what Danielle was talking about yesterday with the camp that she went to and how it was just mind-blowing and she didn't understand a lot of it. You know, don't worry if a lot of the stuff is kind of in that category for you, but just try to keep in mind, you know, just the basics of it. But this moment is the center of everything. It is the only thing that exists, and you're a part of it. And you are a part of everything that exists, and you are part of the revelation or the manifestation of God's goodness just by being here and being a part of the moment. But you will never be able to participate in that or actually celebrate that until you are really present. And that's what contemplation is all about, taking you there. All right.
Yes, and
Now we can
thank you
rejoin the
for that.
Dodgers and the
Wonderful.
Yankees,
Great
right?
conversation.
Oh,
This is-
good.
Yeah, and I appreciate that I got for just a fraction of an experience of dancing on the pen was a lot of fun.
All
Thank you,
right.
Brady, for that. I
Thank
appreciate
you, Brady.
that.
Thank you, Tony. That was great.
All right. Scotty.
Thank you, Lord, for this evening and the time we spent together exploring all these different possibilities. And truly an infinite number of possibilities, an infinite number of moments, an infinite number of doorways to step through. And trying to figure out where and when and how we should go sometimes gets us so complicated we forget to just be what we are. The moment. We are the moment. Right here, right now, wherever we are, whatever we're doing, we are the moment, because it's the only moment you can interact with. Right here and right now. And I pray that the clarity that that brings me brings that to the rest of my friends here tonight, my family, and that we're just able to enjoy our relationship with each other and with you, for which we're eternally grateful, Lord. It's in your Son's precious and holy name that we pray and we give our thanks and say our amens. Amen.
Amen, everyone. Thanks for
Good
playing.
night.
This was a great night.
Thank you all.
Good night,
See you
guys.
Sunday.
Yankees are up
Bye-bye.
1. Oh no.
It's fine.
Hi, Kathy.
Pray, Kathy, pray.
Thanks.
Pray.
Bye-bye, Jordana.
Good night,
Bye,
guys.
Bye.
Bye,
Good night.
guys.
Good night,
Bye,
Jordana.
everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Good night, Jordana.
Good night. See you on
See you
Sunday.
Sunday. Bye.
Bye.